just when you think the game is all set and done after a really dominant display by Chelsea, in the final minute of the game, Harry Kane, the man of the moment, glances a header into the back of the net in the 95th minute, sending the end of the game into chaos and ending Thomas Tuchel's perfect tactical display. This is the Premier League that we all love. Earlier on this afternoon on my Instagram and Twitter, I posted whether or not April 2018 could be repeated today. That was the last time Spurs got a win away at Stamford Bridge. Other than that, it's one win in 37 games for Tottenham, with Antonio Conte coming in, a revitalised Tottenham squad, brilliant signings over the summer. They looked dangerous the other week versus Southampton. It was definitely on the cards that they could pull a result. I'm sure Chelsea fans were slightly more nervous than they were usually, especially how highly that they rate Antonio Conte. However, that was not how the first 45 minutes went at all. The first 45 minutes of that game was some of the best football I've seen Chelsea play since they played Real Madrid at the Bernabeu. It was an outstanding display from the defence to the attack. First, we'll talk about the midfield, because Tottenham's midfield looked lost. They were not able to press. They were not able to keep the ball. Kulusevski looked lost. Bentancur just wasn't non-existent. I didn't realise Hojbjerg was playing the game until about 20 minutes in. Whereas on the other hand, Chelsea's midfield was organised. They had Kante. An underrated part of his game is his attacking play. He was able to skip past players, put balls through the lines. Jorginho next to him, who was sitting back just in between Kante and Mount. He was running the game, always finding a pass, and if there wasn't one on, he'd find one anyway. And Mason Mount doing his usual game. A very underrated player, but was constantly switching sides. A brilliant display from the entire midfield three. And them, combined with the attack as well, with those front three, were pressing brilliantly at this Spurs back line. Spurs were not able to play out from the back at all. Reece James was essentially man-marking Son for the whole of that first half. Just always on him. Son could not get a sniff. Son could not run in, not get a ball played through to him, couldn't link up any of the play. Reece James is a brilliant right back, and I think he showed it, especially dealing with such a talented player in Son. Carrying on with that right-hand side as well, alongside Reece James was Ruben Loftus-Cheek, who I think had a really solid game today. A player that we've always thought has a lot of potential, but has never really showed it when he's been playing in the midfield or sort of attacking midfield role that he's been put in the past. But Thomas Tuchel has got him out on that right wing-back spot, and he looks brilliant. Reece James would often drift into the middle, man-marking Son. Son would try and find a bit of space, and Loftus-Cheek would cover that right-back spot. But then on the ball, in the attack, he would bomb forward, offer some space on that right-hand side, often interplaying with Kai Havertz, who would often drift out onto that right-hand side as well. He looked strong, he looked dominant, good technical ability as well, and hopefully he's found his position and he can carry on playing there and really improve. Now, to give Tottenham the best amount of credit I can for this first half, it was very difficult to really understand what they were trying to do. They were being pressed out their minds. The midfield looked lost, like I said. But defensively, they looked okay. They looked pretty solid. Often Chelsea would run out of room in and around that 18-yard box as Tottenham would close down the half spaces really well, get every man behind the ball. So if that was their plan going into the game, and hopefully, defending really deep and then getting on the counter, it could have worked if their midfield tried. But saying that, when it came to defending a set piece in the 20th minute of the game, they did not do well, put it that way. They all drifted to the front post, leaving Koulibaly with acres of room, and he finishes it like a striker on the volley into that right hand side of the goal. Zonal marking was not working. I don't know what they were trying. It makes no one take any responsibility for marking anyone, and it leaves people like Koulibaly at the back, who apparently have got a sweet right foot on them. Now, it was obvious at half-time Tottenham needed to change something, but they came out in the second half changing nothing at all, and that just led to a carbon copy of the first half. Chelsea dominating, brilliant pressure as always, creating chances on goal. Jorginho running the show in that middle of the park, until he got a little bit tricky for his own good, tried to roll back on the edge of his box, got dispossessed, out to Hojbjerg, edge of the 18, hits a low shot, past Mendy, into the bottom left hand of the corner, and all of a sudden, we've got a game on. All of a sudden, it's 1-1, and the game is on a knife edge. It was clear that James was man-marking Son really tightly in that first half. He was not allowing him to have any space at all, pressing him really high up the pitch, and a useless Son is a useless Spurs, in my opinion. But interestingly, how Antonio Conte managed to combat that was around the 60th minute mark. He brought on Richarlison. So they had a front two, more or less, of Kane and Richarlison. Kane would sort of drift onto that left-hand side a little bit more, take up the time of Reece James and Ruben Loftus-Cheek, neither of them really knowing when to pick up Kane, sort of creating a little bit of confusion. That allowed Son a lot more room, a lot more time to drop a little bit deeper, a little bit more centrally, which I think is becoming a strong position of his, and also created angles for Kane to put balls through, and his link-up play is excellent. So that attack definitely was a lot more fluid for Tottenham, and it caused Chelsea a little bit more problems as the game got a little bit more heated. However, again, it was Spurs' midfield that let them down once again. Their midfield had an absolute shocker today, in my opinion. It was too easy for Kante to slip in Sterling, and Sterling looks to his right-hand side. Reece James, who would maybe get a bit more of a handful in this second half, was able to just bomb on, completely free on that right-hand side, and finishes it beautifully past Lloris. 2-1, very well deserved. Although Tottenham were causing Chelsea a little bit more problems, it was just clear that Chelsea had a lot more chemistry together. They were a lot technically better on the ball. They were better physically, and they deserved this lead at 2-1. But just when you think that the game was all said and done, and Chelsea had got a nice 3 points against Spurs, against a strong Spurs nonetheless, of course, the Premier League always throws in wild cards, and a corner swings in the 95th minute of the game. Harry Kane glances the ball into the back of the net. Well, glances the ball into the right-hand side of the goal, and Reece James, I think, off his knee into the back of the net. It was unlucky from Reece James. He'd had a brilliant game, obviously getting himself a goal. I'm not too sure whether that's gone down as an own goal, but it certainly helped the ball in the back of the net, put it that way. Like I said, it was a brilliant tactical display by Thomas Tuchel and his team in that first half, rolling on into the second half as well. But Tottenham found a way. This is what good teams do. They find ways to snatch points, and they've snatched a point at Stamford Bridge. And I'm sure they'll look at this game later on in the season as a crucial point for them, because they certainly did not deserve it. It got very heated as well after the full-time whistle blown, but that's just two passionate managers trying to back their teams. But this is what we want the Premier League to be. Often the Manchester City and Liverpool rivalry is sort of labelled as just too friendly, you know? They both respect each other a little bit too much maybe, but two managers passionately backing their players, the referees' decisions, disagreeing with each other. You know, this is what we want the Premier League to be. Competitive, dramatic, and exciting. And it certainly was all of those. It was a brilliant London derby to end the weekend. And we roll on to Monday for Liverpool versus Crystal Palace. Thank you guys very much for watching. Hopefully you managed to get a little bit of insight into the game that I've offered. And